This is Isaac Morehouse. Welcome to the podcast where we discuss education, entrepreneurship, big ideas, how to put them into practice in the real world, and above all, how to live free. So a few years ago, I was at a conference and I noticed a friend sitting across the room. So I went over and sat by him, and he was sitting with another guy who I'd never met. And so I introduced myself. I said, "Hi, I'm Isaac. What's your story?" And he said, "Well, if you want to know my story, you can read about it in a book." And I kind of paused for a minute. I didn't know if he was joking. And my friend said, "No, it's true. The well-known author Harvey Pekar, the author of American Splendor, wrote a book about Michael Malice. This is Michael Malice. And the book is called Ego and Hubris." And I said, are you serious?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I said, "Well, give me a synopsis. What's the book about?" And Michael said with a complete straight face, "It's about a boy who thought he was always right and grew up to discover that he was." So, Michael Malice, welcome to the show.
You got a few things wrong there.
Did I? Oh, I was trying so hard.
First of all, it's about a boy who thought he was better than everyone and was. Second of all, what you don't remember is Carl introduced us and sat back waiting with popcorn, imaginary popcorn, thinking there was going to be drama. And you said, "Oh, Malice as in malice," and I said Morehouse as in whorehouse. And we took. Here's the thing, though, Isaac, you are so preppy that I didn't realize that you were like on the right side about everything. So I just assumed, because my college Bucknell was very, very preppy, and I hated it. So when I see someone who looks like that, automatically I assume they're the worst.
I love it that you call me preppy, because a couple guys that I work with are always making fun of me for wearing like old like clothes that aren't fashionable or whatever. So now I'm going to tell them Michael Malice said that I'm preppy.
You don't think you've got that like Ken doll kind of vibe going?
I kind of have like the hair that sort of flips up or whatever, but
you're always smiling.
Well, that's okay. So that was the other thing I was going to say. So, we met then, and despite, maybe your initial misgivings,
No, I was out for blood. I wasn't misgivings. I was ready for carnage.
we interacted over social media and things over the next couple years, and we did a conference together, a fee seminar together, where we were both faculty, and we were eating lunch, and you said to me, you just stopped and said, "Are you always this sunny?"
I don't remember that, but I'm sure I did.
You said, "What do you like when you're angry?" And I thought, man, do I really come off that way? So I don't know. I guess I'm a relentless optimist. Did you consider yourself a pessimist or just a cynic, a misanthrope?
I don't think I'd ascribe to any of those words. I think that the world needs Superman, and it needs Batman, and it needs someone who is going to be out at night beating up the bad people to make sure that those few sparks of light can be maintained. So that's how I see myself. I wouldn't, and you're Superman, and that's fine. You can go, put on your glasses and protect just like everybody else. But for those of us billionaires who achieve physical perfection, we've taken a different path.
Yeah, good. Well, good for you. So, okay, let's talk about briefly, and this will be a good way to kind of get into your story a little bit. This book, Ego and Hubris, which, by the way, is hilarious, entertaining. It's wonderful, by Harvey Pekar. How did you end up getting Harvey Pekar to write a book about you, or how did he end up deciding that he wanted to do this? What's the story?
Well, I did a screenplay about this band from the 80s that never got produced, and the keyboard player for the band did the animation for Harvey's film, American Splendor. And the producer of the film sent out an email to everyone in his production company that said, "Harvey's in town with nothing to do. If you want to hang out with him, now's your chance." And I'm the only one who took him up on this. And we hit it off royally right away. And at first he wanted to write a book contrasting his family's experience coming over from Eastern Europe in the early 20th century with my family's, which was, he felt indicative of the second wave, which came over late 70s, early 80s. But the more that he learned about me and discovered that, as he puts it on the cover, that I'm a piece of work, the more the book just became the Michael Malice story.
And so in the book, and it's been a while since I've read it, but I remember, if I'm remembering correctly, after college, you kind of tried the corporate world in a couple variations, working for some corporations, some temp agencies, doing consulting.
Yeah.
And like, what made you? How did you transition from that into writing?
Uh, it was very difficult. I wasn't a struggling artist in the sense that, like, I was making good money in working at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, hating it, hating all the people I was with. Well, not all, but a lot of them, hating the culture, knowing, I felt like a prisoner in many ways, even though the prison bars were gilded, so to speak.
Hmm.
So it's just a matter of, um, if you're gonna play roulette, at some point your number is gonna hit. So whenever people ask me for advice, for me, I think it's just a numbers game and perseverance. You keep knocking on doors, eventually one of them is going to open, and that's what ended up happening.
So okay, so now you are. I guess I should have set this up better at the beginning to say what it is that you do now. Now you're a writer, a professional writer. That's your obviously an interest, but it's also your career, how you make a living. Had you always, while you were working at Goldman in these various places, were you interested in writing? Were you always writing on the
No,
side or
no
no?
interest in writing. Still not that much interest in writing. I had several goals. One is not to have an alarm clock. Two, to set my own schedule, and never have to. Three, never have to make small talk, and four, never have to interact with people I don't want to.
Those are
And
excellent goals.
those were my goals. So writing was a means to that end. I
So
don't think I'm a particularly amazing writer, but I don't have to be amazing. I just have to be competent, and I have to be able to make rent.
so you wouldn't buy the sort of follow your bliss or pursue your passion argument. You would say, look,
Those are my passions. My
okay, so
passion
okay,
is
so
not having to talk to people
gotcha. So the skill of writing is something you developed because it was the best way that you have thus far discovered to achieve those goals.
and to be in my underwear as much as possible. Yes.
We're doing this over Skype, and you're in Brooklyn, so I'm not going to ask right now whether or not that's the case. The
It is
camera's
the
turned
case.
off.
And they're gingham too.
Yeah, I have noticed. Maybe we'll get to that later. You're kind of a, I don't know. I don't want to call you a fashionista, but I'm always afraid I'll offend you if I put you in the
You
wrong category.
you
But
cannot offend me. There's literally nothing you can say that will, if you personally, I mean, that would offend me. Honestly.
good, okay.
Well, actually, that's not true. That sounds like a challenge. If someone told that to me, that would be a challenge accepted.
Well, I just noticed that I was like subconsciously rubbing my hands together after I said good, and then I looked. It felt kind of strange. So So you hadn't been doing any writing. I mean, figuring out that writing was the path to being in your underwear all the time. Did that happen quickly? I mean, what was your first like paid writing gig, and how did that happen?
It didn't happen quickly. I started, the first thing I tried to do was stand up, and I realized that this is something that takes a lot of time in the evenings. It's very, very hard to have a day job and do stand up.
Hmm.
And it's something that even if I made it as a stand up, I'd still have to be traveling a lot, which eliminates the, being a shut in. So that was a problem. So writing kind of breaking, I had a website that kind of went big, and the Harvey thing, of course, was a big kind of credential.
The website
calling-
was Overheard in New York.
Yeah, but we don't talk about that.
Oh, we don't. Okay.
Yeah, so for legal reasons. But the Harvey was a big, the Harvey Pekar thing was a big calling card because Harvey has a lot of cred in the entertainment industry. So when he writes a book for the first time about somebody else, that is kind of the best door knocker you could think of.
Yeah.
So there was an editor who had a book proposal of mine which didn't go anywhere, but he needed a co-author for a project, and that fell through too. And then he offered me what became my first co-authoring book, which was Made in America with Ultimate Fighting Champion Matt Hughes, which was a New York Times bestseller, and I'm very proud of that book.
So is it? I was gonna say you're a ghostwriter, but that's not correct. You call it a co-author in these
Right.
books.
If you want to be completely pedantic and a complete douche, which I like to be sometimes, technically, since my name's on all the covers, I'm not a ghostwriter.
Gotcha. Okay. So now you've done what, 4 or 5 of these books with celebrities, where it's essentially their story and you're helping them tell it. What's that like? I mean, what's the actual process like? Is it you're getting on the phone and having lengthy conversations and then writing it all out? Are you getting outlines or written things, or how's it work?
You can't 100% get into how it works for obvious reasons, but here's how it works. Here's how people have it wrong. People have this idea that when you're working in a book with a celebrity, like I'm doing everything myself and they are just signing off on it, or like they don't even see it, and it's really not true. The best way to think of if I'm a talented athlete or a musician or, businessman, writing is a technical skill. Like you're not going to be a businessman and then, not hire a plumber to fix your toilet or not hire a chef to cater your meal, even if you do know how to do these things, right?
Yeah.
So writing takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of skill. So the best way to think of a co-author is kind of like a defense attorney. Like he prepares you when you're going to go to court to have your story presented coherently and clearly and engagingly. So it's just really the technical skill of writing that you're bringing to the table, and it really is their book in every way, except for when they're written poorly. A lot of times, like I'll never like George W. Bush's book Decision Points. I read 2 pages, and it's written in this very poetic, beautiful language, and we know how President Bush speaks, and this isn't even, but that's not even a knock against him. I think books should be conversational because you want to feel like holy crap, I'm sitting here talking to George Bush, and I'm really getting his perspective across. That's the goal. One of the best reviews I've ever gotten in my life was a very negative review, which is of the first D.L. Hughley book, who's a comedian, and the reviewer on Amazon said, "This book sounds exactly like how he talks.
Wow.
It's as if he sat down with a tape recorder." And I'm like, thank you, you crazy lady. Like, do you know how hard it is to replicate a stand-up comedian's cadence and speech in literary form? It's almost impossible. So it was just very amazing what some people don't understand.
So I imagine in that business, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's probably, and I don't know how many, a lot of sort of known co-authors where if you're a celebrity or a business person looking to have somebody help you write a book, there's like I don't know, maybe a known pool to draw from. And some of those people, or maybe this is wrong, I would guess some of them don't work so much to write it in the voice of the person that the book is about, and they kind of have their own voice and their own style. Are there differing approaches, differing schools, or is your approach of trying to make it sound as much like the person you're working with the common one?
I don't know if it's the common one, but I'm certain it's the correct one. I know it's not the common one because a lot of times I'll read a book and I'll just absolutely hate it for this very reason. And like here's a good example, because people, I think co-authors often try to make the book sound literary when the person's not a literary figure. And when I was doing the Matt Hughes book and we're talking about his testimony of how he found God, the copy editor went in and when Matt's talking about Christ and God, he's using he, capital H for him, and they changed it all to lowercase. And I'm just like,
oh no, I grew up evangelical. Any Christian would capitalize those.
Of course. And you don't, and if you saw that I'm doing this consistently, clearly it's there for a reason, and my just jaw dropped. So I think a lot of times people, when they're trying to help someone write their book, they try to make it quote unquote correct, but that is absolutely incorrect. Because a celebrity's not trying to write, War and Peace. That's exactly inappropriate. Maybe this is my Warhol background coming through, but I find it absolutely the wrong decision.
So do you ever feel like, so you kind of see this as just a special skill you've mastered to write in other people's voices, but you also write in your own voice. I know you do pieces for Thought Catalog and different outlets.
Yeah.
Do you prefer one over the other?
I prefer not writing. Dorothy Parker said, "I hate writing. I love having written." I think I'm much better running my mouth than I am running a keyboard. So
you don't enjoy the process itself when you're sitting you don't enter into like the flow state that everybody talks about and just get in the zone and really enjoy it?
I do, but that's less than 100% of the time. But when I'm on TV, being a complete a-hole, that's transcendent to me.
Okay, so let's talk about TV. So you frequently appear on all kinds of different shows. You're on the Kennedy show. You've been on at least a couple times in the last, I don't know, a couple weeks anyway. Yeah. And I know you've been on a number of other shows. You were on a show with Carson Daly some time ago. How did that start? Was it purely to talk about the books you had done, or what gave you your in? And then, once you're in, are you just sort of in and you keep getting invited back? How's it work?
Well, I mean, the first in was talking about my last book, Dear Reader, and then, they just said, "Hey, this guy, I like the cut of this guy's jib. Let's give him a chance on a panel." And then it's like, oh, this is like a fish to water. This guy knows how this process works. And I mean, it's just I'm the second funniest guy in the Liberty Movement, so of course they're going to keep bringing me back.
So when you're on TV, do you see it as, look, my job is to be entertaining, so I got to give the people what they want, or do you see it as,
no.
I don't care what anybody wants, I'm going to do what I want to do, or is it just are both the same thing?
They're not the same thing at all. I don't care what the people want. That's number one.
Okay.
But it's not the Michael Malice show. It's Kennedy. So I am there to be entertaining, giving the parameters of her show, and I'm not there to upstage her. Not that I could. I mean, she's brilliant and quick, and one of the fastest minds I've ever seen. But you're there under certain understood parameters. Like if someone else is on the panel and they're not being funny, I'm not going to be kind of taking jabs at them. That happened once, but I mean, so I'm not there to overshadow the other people. So it's really, there is a lot of, background and programming going on that I think most people aren't aware of, but a good person will be aware of.
So I don't know if you're allowed to answer this either, but I'm always curious with people that make frequent appearances on these sort of panels and things. Are these paid appearances, or do you do it just for the pub?
Are you asking me how much money I make, Isaac?
No, I want to know just in the realm of TV. Just in the realm of TV.
Isaac, what's the next question?
Okay. Well, this one connects to money as well.
It's not universal. I'll just answer it that way. It's not universal.
Okay. I kind of assume that, for most people, especially if they write and do other things, if being a public figure is good for their brand, that, they do it anyway, whether or not they were paid. I was just curious if that's a practice. Okay. So your book that you mentioned that got you started on TV, Dear Reader.
Yeah.
This book is in many ways the same type as the books you've written with some of these celebrities, but in some ways it's very different. This is the unauthorized autobiography of.
Damn it, Isaac! You had one job.
Well, I'm actually holding the cover and looking at.
Well,
it
then,
right
do you
now.
not know how to read?
It's a confession I've never wanted to make.
I'll get you the Braille version.
The autobiography of Kim Jong Il. The infamous North Korean dictator, and it has right on the front 100% true, so we know it's true.
And true is in quotes.
Yes, true is in quotes. So this
Yes.
is your I don't want to say satire because I've heard you correct people.
Started. Oh my God!
How would you?
Okay,
yeah. Well, I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
How would you categorize this book?
Have you read it yet?
I've read like the first 20% of it probably, and I never finished it. I haven't. I found it for this interview, and I was like, crap, I need to finish this book.
Why would you admit to that?
Well, I want to be honest here. I don't want to pretend like I have read it. And what if you ask me?
Dishonest.
What if you're like, hey, what about the story?
Why would I be asking you about these stories when I wrote them?
I don't know. I don't want to be, caught off guard. So.
Oh my God, that is not a preppy answer, Isaac.
See, maybe I'm not preppy.
You need to read your Carnegie again and again. So, briefly, the book is written in the same style as any celebrity autobiography you're going to find. Whether it's, I don't know, Lindsay Lohan or Joan Collins or some football player. And this book, it's a first-person account of the life and history, the life of Kim Jong Il and the history of North Korea. So the question of whether it's a satire, I have done everything in my power to fight it being a satire for this reason. I did not play up any of the insanity. I did not, make it more ridiculous than it was. I played it as straight as possible because I want that reader, when they're reading this book, to be like, holy crap, this is what they actually say and believe. They don't have to wonder what is Michael Malice adding to make it crazier. Michael Malice downplayed the craziness as much as possible and gave it as much coherence as possible, which is a ghostwriter's job.
So everything that's in this book, all of the stories and facts mentioned about Kim Jong Il, those come from actual publications and sort of well-known circulated stories.
Right, which is why on the cover it says 100% true, and true is in quotes. It's 100% what is presented as true. So if you're going to categorize it, I would categorize it as a farce because it is so absurd in its nature. But any satirical I think people have this idea that if you have politics and you add humor, that translates to satire. That's not what satire is. I'm not kind of exaggerating and caricaturing what's presented as fact. I am decaricature it,
Right.
caricaturing as much as possible, making it seem sane as much as possible. And when you downplay all the craziness and it's still that crazy, it's even more horrifying,
So
I
if you
feel.
if you were to come into the world with no knowledge of anything else and only know what the propaganda machine in North Korea provides, this is the factual account that you would write of this person's
Yes,
life.
that's
So you
exactly.
visited North Korea to gather information and all kinds of pamphlets and publications, doing the research for this book.
Yeah.
What was that like, and how were you able to visit? I'm not sure like the rules and what it's
It's
like to visit.
it's illegal to go for Americans.
I like it already. I'm
It's
intrigued.
perfectly safe. In fact, if you go there and you murder someone, there will be no consequences for you because human life is of no value in North Korea and you are there as a guest of the state. So you have carte blanche to do whatever you want. The worst thing that'll happen to you is if you're deported. It's really the opposite of what people think. You are much more important to them with your American dollars than any of the people who are, prisoners and captives of that.
Wow. Wow. So it's illegal. The U.S. makes it illegal for you to go?
No, it's legal. It's perfectly
Oh,
legal.
I thought you said it's illegal.
No, it is
Okay.
legal.
It's
It is
perfectly
legal to
legal.
go.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha. And
you
and so are you guided the whole time by some
Yeah,
state
so people
appointee?
think you have guides with you. You have two guides, a male and a female, and they watch each other. And people think this sounds so ominous. They're not going through your toilet bowl, okay? They're not even allowed on your floor in the hotel because the floors are segregated by
So
nationality.
they're less invasive than the TSA.
Correct. And the other thing is, and more polite and more amiable. The other thing is this. When you go to many countries, if I went to London and I went on a tour with a tour guide, what would be weird about that? So yeah, they're showing you around to certain places and everything's, kind of set up, but it's not like they aren't getting drunk and talking to you. And it's not like they're robots. They're human beings who have got a very, very job that's very, very respected, that makes them very wealthy, and they know, who butters their bread, so to speak. So they're great people, these guys, and that makes it even more pernicious that there's so much humanity in North Korea despite this dictatorship.
So, I mean, what was it like visiting? Is it fun? Are there like enjoyable, nice places to visit?
It's If you're a nerd like I am, I can't recommend it enough. And it's impossible to describe what it's like. The way I described it when I wrote a recent article about it was it's like going to another planet back in time because not only is everything dated, everything is foreign and insane and has been consciously put there for a purpose. It's not like this building just sprung out of the earth. So everywhere you look, it's just like, what am I looking at, and how? And you're trying to kind of port it to your own experiences and make sense of it, but it's not always easy to do, and it's just absolutely fascinating. And talking to people and figuring out like what do they know, what do they not know, what are they thinking. They have to play their cards very, very, very close to their chest, lest they and their families be kind of executed. So it's absolutely, there's not 1 second you're not going to be fascinated by what's going on.
I saw an article. I didn't get a chance to read it. Somebody tweeted it or something just the other day that said something to the effect of North Korea is the largest cult in history, and the implication being that unlike many really closed, sort of dictatorial countries or some of the former Soviet countries, that again, this may be untrue, but that most of the people in North Korea actually believe in all this stuff and believe that like a cult member, like you kind of have to like deprogram them to even make them aware of what they're missing out on. What would you say to that? Would you say that's a somewhat accurate characterization?
Um, it's a little inaccurate, and here's why. When you're in an actual cult, right, that's a very, very small subset of your larger society, right? If I join Jonestown or Waco, I'm in this little compound, it's us versus the world kind of thing. And I guess you can extrapolate that to an entire nation, but the degrees of belief in North Korea, are not universal at all. Just like in any population, you're going to have a statistical distribution. I think so. They are a cult in this sense. Even people who escape still believe that the great leader, the founder of North Korea, Kim Il Sung, is the greatest man who ever lived, and that everything he can do is amazing. And maybe they'll come to understand that he couldn't literally walk on water like they claimed, but that still he's the one who had these monumental achievements. And there's some reason for them to believe this, because to his credit, North Korea is the last one standing. USSR fell away, all of Eastern Europe fell away. They're the last ones with Stalinism, so they, in a sense, did it right, where everyone else did it wrong. And by doing it right, it means concentration camps and allowing your population to starve and having absolutely no sense of humanity. But if that's your goal, they did it. So when people say that they're crazy and they're unstable, it's like they're the most stable of all these countries. And if they're crazy, why have they been so successful at putting their plan into purpose? Ayn Rand once said, errors of this magnitude are never made innocently. And one of the things I map out in Dear Reader, as Kim Jong Il lays out his life story in the shadow of his father, is just how they constructed this absolute massive totalitarian edifice. This didn't happen overnight. This was a decades-long scheme by the Kim regime to have absolute control of that country.
Wow. All right, give me like 2 or 3 of the craziest quote facts, about 100% true facts about Kim Jong Il that you discovered in doing the research.
Well, I mean, I think people tend to think of Kim Jong Il in this kind of Chuck Norris sense, that Kim Jong Il doesn't do push-ups, he pushes the earth away from his body, that kind of thing. And that's not really the analog. The analog is Kim Jong Il and now it's going to be Kim Jong Un, is the only competent person in the entire country. So the stories, which I had to read in the original communist propaganda, which are so mind-numbing, are things like, there's a factory. This is a very famous story. There's a factory and things aren't going well at the factory because of some lathe, and no one knows what to do. And Kim Jong Il shows up, and then he looks at the girl's lathe and he sees that there's a tiny little hole that was caked with something. And once that hole was unplugged, everything went smoothly. And but for Kim Jong Il, we wouldn't be producing all this stuff. So those very famous shots we see of Kim Jong Il looking at things and Kim Jong Un now, they call that field guidance, and it's this idea that if he's not constantly putting out fires, everything's going to go to hell in the whole country.
What's scary about that is it's not too far off in some ways to the way that a lot of people view government as a whole, or certain politicians in almost any country. And I think that the fact that apparently I've heard people claim that some people have read Dear Reader and thought that this was like true without quotes. And to me, if that's the case, that's so frightening that people here, just like people in North Korea, are so able and willing to believe that like you need, the great leader to come and tell all the hapless people what to do all the time.
Well, no, I think you're referring to that one post Brian put up where like a fifth grader read the book and became a fan of Kim Jong Il.
Yeah. I was finding this really hard to believe.
Especially if there's no possibility that anyone reading this book in its entirety, who's over the age of 12, is going to have a positive appraisal of North Korea. That was my goal. My goal was to explain it and make it coherent. But when you read, here's a story of how I made it coherent and entertaining, and at the same time put forth their message. So I think it was in the early 50s, early 60s. I don't remember. At one point, they decided all foreign literature was going to be destroyed in the whole country, including Marx. So there's going to be a few books that are in the library, but if you want to go to that library, you got to write down your name so they keep track. All foreign publications were destroyed nationwide, right? This massive censorship, because the idea is if it's not from Koreans and if it's not from the great leader, we don't need to know this. This is something that's almost impossible for us to wrap our heads around, thank God. Sure. And the way I have Kim Jong Il explain in the book, he goes, look, you don't keep old food in your cupboards, right? You don't open it up and have old oranges. These ideas have been outdated by Kim Il-sung's, the great leader's Juche idea, so we don't need them anymore. And if anything, they're just going to rot our brains. So this is a great thing. This isn't censorship. This is liberating the mind. So that's constantly how I have him talking, because they are very boastful about what they do. They're not ashamed that they have this system. This is their pride and joy, and they regard it as like the light of freedom, against the yellow toxic winds of capitalism.
So if you're not horrified by this book, you're a horrible person.
Dumb.
So this book was self-published, right? You went to a couple publishers and nobody wanted to pick it up?
They couldn't wrap their heads around it, because when publishing is going the way, Isaac, I'm sure you remember when we had CD stores
Oh yeah.
creating ourselves, and you go to Sam Goodies or the Wiz or whatever, the Coconuts or whatever the chain was, and you look through those long boxes, and you come home, rip them out, and take out the CDs. And now CD stores don't exist, and yet somehow there's more music than ever. And bookstores and publishing is going that way, which is when you write a book, you flip over the book and you look at the upper left back cover, there's going to be a little category to put it in: humor, biography, current events, self-help. But when you invent a new genre like I have, I mean, are you going to put this under history? Are you going to put this under autobiography? Are you going to put it under humor? People didn't know what to make of it. And I said, to heck with this. I've written many books. I know the process. I don't need, editors to give me headaches and not understand it. So let the market speak. So I did a Kickstarter and I raised 30 grand, I produced it and I could not be happier.
That was really cool to see. I remember when you launched that Kickstarter, and that was I mean, looking at the
And
book.
it was filmed at the Fee Mansion.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Oh, what a great place. I absolutely love visiting that place. I mean,
Well,
this
it's out
book
now.
this book was a lot of work. So was the Kickstarter just to essentially pay for your cost of living and the associated costs with publishing the books? Because when you look at the book and the amount of work that must have gone into it, um, 30,000 seems like a heck of a deal.
This book almost killed me
Really?
because I had to read 60 books as research. I wanted this to be the only book you would ever need to read about North Korea to understand and completely know everything. So I didn't want to leave any stone unturned. So not only did I read all their books, which made me want to jump off a bridge, I read all the Western books as well. And then I had to adapt it and I had to make North Korea entertaining and fun, and at the same time let the horror seep through. So this was very, 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 very challenging. But the Kickstarter, did pay the rent, but is also for me proof of concept that there
Yeah.
was market demand, and C, it's also not bad to demonstrate that you can take a concept from idea to production. That's a great thing to establish publicly for anyone.
How did you choose the subject matter? Have you been fascinated by North Korea for a while, or?
I had not. I was actually working on a project that never came to fruition, and my friend Justin Esch, who created Bacon Salt and Bacon A's and Bacon Coffins and Bacon Lube, he just took me to his house for a barbecue, and he gave me the idea. He said, you should do Kim Jong Il's autobiography. And what really struck me with that was this: I couldn't think of anyone who had higher name recognition, but less is known about them. That
Oh,
huge
yeah.
disparity. I'm like, okay, this is a great place on a bookshelf because no one knows anything about this guy, but everyone knows who he is. And I thought this would be a lot of fun. And the more I read about it, the more I'm like, everyone has this completely wrong, and I'm going to do something about it.
So crowdfunding is, as it's gotten more popular, it's more and more competitive. How did you how did you manage a successful crowdfunding campaign? Like, do you have any particular keys that you think helped you raise the money?
Yeah, have big donors lined up before you launch,
Hmm.
and have them queued up if you need to pull triggers. That was my biggest piece of advice. Um, be as professional as possible. I had Chuck Grimmett, formerly of Fee, film it. I had my buddy Maddox edit it. So those were two, and people are going to be more than happy to help you, if they see you're doing it for yourself, and not just some kind of corporate, wage slave. So those were two pieces of advice. But I don't know that I'm particularly, qualified to give more advice than that.
Was the whole process and publication of the book, was it worth it? You said it almost killed you.
Oh, of course it was worth it. This was like the great achievement of my life to date. So I could not be more ecstatic, and happy with the results. And yeah, there's some typos in the book, but they're my typos. Like one of my other books, there's a typo in the hardcover, and we told the editor, and the paperback came out and wasn't fixed. And it's like, you know what? I have such disdain often for how publishing works that I'm perfectly happy to own my own mistakes.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about I don't know if you have daily routines or habits for writing. Like, do you get up and set aside a chunk of the day to work on whatever writing project you're doing, or how do you manage your time and do your do your work?
Well, I am a sprinter and I'm not a marathon person, which is another reason I couldn't have a 9 to 5. I can only work like 2 hours a day because for me, writing is very, very intense, especially when you're helping, when you're working with somebody else. So I'll wake up at 11 every day, mess around on the internet, go out and get lunch. I'll leave the house to get lunch in the city, come back, mess around the internet again, do some reading, maybe whatever, watching TV. 4 o'clock, I'll write for an hour. Uh, then relax, go to dinner, and then maybe I'll come back and write again, then go to the gym, and I'll be in bed at 2. So that's the usual routine.
Wow. So what, like, how many words or pages do you get done in those 1 hour chunks?
3 pages an hour.
Okay. That is pretty intense. That's pretty
Yeah.
intense.
So that's like an article. Like I can do an article, 3 pages of a book. So if 6 pages of a book, a 300-page book could be done in 50 days, which I would never do. But I mean, and that was the great thing about knowing my pacing. I didn't have writer's block with Dear Reader because as soon as I did my 3 pages for the day, I allowed myself to check out because it was so intense, that I could just relax and not think about it. And then just knowing I had the next 3 pages queued up for tomorrow.
Do you edit as you write?
Never. Well, I mean, you read that article I wrote,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It was a softball question because I
Yeah.
read your thought catalog article about
The biggest mistake I'm glad that I realized to do is never, ever, ever edit as you write. You do the first. I learned that from Peggy Noonan in her book, What I Saw at the Revolution, about being Reagan's speechwriter. You write it, and it's going to be crap, and you're going to cringe, and you go back and you make it nice, and then you go back and make it really pretty. So that's my process.
So you have another hobby or obsession. I don't know what to call it. You're part of a little known underground world full of all kinds of seedy characters, pun very much intended. That is the world of succulents. You're a collector of succulents.
Yeah, I've got 200 species, but I'm kind of over them,
Are you serious?
Yeah, I got everything I needed.
So
There
now-
was this
now
one
what?
plant that like Strumeria where it has 2 leaves and they're circular and they're shaped like a Venn diagram. The leaves overlap and they're sticky and have a red outline. And I got them. They're from South Africa. I'm the first one in America to get them. But in the States, you don't have as much light as the African desert, so the leaves kind of stretch out and they just look like bunny ears or something. And I'm just like, ugh, So that's kind of disappointing. But no, after a while, you do this for a few years. It's there's only so many that you can get. And I mean, they're all waking up now for the summer. They go dormant in the winter. But I like them because I think of them as God's mistakes because they're all so misshapen and hideous that it's kind of fun to look at them and be like, how does this thing exist?
And you told me when we were talking at that same conference that I mentioned before, we were both faculty, about you've been to, I don't know, like fairs or
Plant shows,
conventions, plant shows.
Yeah.
And there's like a whole culture there. I asked you about cacti, and you said, "Oh no, that's like
Gauche.
really gauche." Yeah,
Gauche.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're part of this. You're part of this little subculture. I mean, are you considered like a badass in that world?
I got banned from one of the plant boards.
How does that happen?
Because I have a plant schizobasis and it's self-fertile, so it makes little bulbs all over the place, right? And I didn't want to throw them in the garbage. I had a ton of them, and I offered it up on the site. I'm like, hey, if anyone wants to pay shipping, you could have these. They look pretty awesome because the leaves just look like a TV wire, like it's like a fractal thing, and when they have flowers, it just looks like this cloud of little flowers. It's just amazing plant, and highly toxic, of course. And the guy's like, no, this is not a commercial website. You're banned. And I'm just like, I got banned from a succulent website. So it was very unfortunate. I guess that's a badge of honor.
So if you've lost, like your search is over, you have all the plants you want. Are
Yeah.
you moving on to some new hobby or
I
collectible?
did last year. I moved on to like fancy denim.
Yeah. Okay. So you are a fashionista. I have seen all these pictures on Instagram of these like bizarre expensive jeans, and you were like doing polls. Should I buy these?
So I got these super, super fancy jeans that are dyed in Japanese mud for 6 months, right? And I wore them to all the denim stores when I visited LA, and none of the people working there commented on them.
Oh.
And I'm like, this is the most money down a hole thing I've ever done. So I'm done with the jeans too.
Okay, man, just your heart's been broken from one hobby to the next.
That's why I'm Batman and you're Superman.
So, do you have a next writing project that you have in mind that you want to do?
Well, I'm working on D.L. Hughley's second book, which is called Black Man, White House, an oral history of the Obama administration.
Oh, very cool. What about another self-published work? You have anything in mind?
I've got a few things in mind, but I mean, the TV stuff is going so well. I have so much more fun with it that I think once DL and I polish off this book, it's going to be kind of like reassessing and seeing where to go next.
Yep.
There's a lot of ideas for next books, but I've got so much on my plate. It's kind of hard to figure out what to do.
Yeah. Do you normally, are you one of those people who's always looking to reduce the number of things that you're doing and like minimize how many
No.
things you're
Okay,
working on?
so becoming a writer was not easy, obviously. And I was a business major. I've never taken an English course, and I was always obsessive about budgeting. And now to be at a point where I'm turning work down is just very foreign to my thinking. So it's very, very hard for me to be like, no, I have too much on my plate. While I'm doing DL's book, I'm helping someone else edit theirs. So I think, okay, I could do two at once, and it was exponentially harder than doing one at a time, which I'm finding out. So, I guess I'm learning as I go is all I could say.
Yeah. That is, I mean, at least for me, I found the ability to say no to things, even things that are good and might be beneficial, just to really weigh the cost and say no has been one of the most valuable things. I'm still learning it, but whenever I do, I'm always, I'm always so thankful.
I don't think I ever say no. I usually either quote some obscene price or don't respond. I'm serious. I think saying no people find off-putting. So I mean, that's why you have agents too.
Yeah.
Like if people want to hire me and if I just throw out some insane number and they back away, that's fine. Um, but no, I did turn down a couple of things because of the workload.
Yeah, that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize. I used to do a lot of events, bring in different speakers at college campuses back in Michigan many years ago. And some of the speakers, people will complain like, oh, this guy has this obscene, $30,000 speaking fee and he's already rich. And why is he doing that? And blah. And I think people are thinking only in terms
Because
of.
he can.
Right. Well, they're thinking only in terms of, he doesn't need the money or, he's wealthy. Why wouldn't he just do it? And it's not even so much about the money. I think in the case of many of these speakers, they donate their money anyway. It's because there's no better way to regulate, your time is limited. And if somebody really wants you and the event's going to be really worth it and they put down 25 or 30 grand, that proves that they're going to turn out people and it's going to be worth your time. It's just a way to regulate your own, the demands on your time as much as it is a way to make money. And I think that's a really interesting insight you have there, rather than just saying no, just quote some absurd price where if they said yes, you'd be happy to do it, but you expect that they won't.
Yeah.
All right. What do you want people to say about you when you're gone?
Oh, Jesus Christ. When I'm gone, I'm taking this planet with me. I'm driving this train into the wall, baby. What do I want people to say about me? I've never thought of that. I don't know. I think the fact that I have a shelf of books kind of speaks for itself. That's my legacy. What people say about me, that's up to them.
My guest today has been Michael Malice. You can find him at michaelmalice.com. You can follow him on Twitter, Facebook. He's on Kennedy frequently, as I mentioned, and the author of several books and hopefully several more. Michael, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Isaac.